If you're walking along a beach and you see some beautiful sand dunes, it would be reasonable to deduce that they're the product of wind and waves, maybe a little rain, just random forces of nature. But if you come upon a sand castle, now that is a different story. Obviously, intelligence was here. We see a moat and towers and a little flag. We know that wind and waves and rain didn't produce this. And we didn't have to be here when those intelligent beings were making this. Obviously, the work speaks for itself. We look at the space station. That's a pretty complex gadget. How many millions of man hours went into that engineering, building that thing, so it can sustain life in space for a few human beings for a little bit of time, and then it has to be refueled and refurbished. But what about Space Station Earth? This little beautiful blue terrarium floating around in space, sustaining a symphony of interdependent, complex life forms, beautiful, self-sustaining, self-healing. And we're to deduce that this little space station Earth just was an accident from some explosion of dirt in a universe? Not having right now the faith to accept such a thing. Or what about the universe itself? We know that the physical constants that are necessary for carbon-based life to exist on this planet are set on like a razor's edge of fine-tuning in this universe. The gravitational constant, if it was changed by just 1 part in 10 to the 40th, then complex life as we know it would not exist in this universe. If the strong nuclear force were off by 1 part in 10,000 billion, then life would not exist. The only element that would exist in the universe would be hydrogen. And we could say the same about the weak nuclear force, or the cosmological constant, or the electromagnetic force. They're set on a razor's edge of fine-tuning. Does such fine-tuning come from explosions in space without plan or design? I don't think so. I can't draw such a conclusion from logic and reason. I'm led to believe that there is a creator and a designer. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Now, what about if you find a heart in the sand? Now, this heart in the sand reveals intelligence in a different way. Here we see meaningful information. And we know that meaningful information always flows from an intelligent source. We can look at the heart, the initials, we know someone is in love, and they wanted to leave a message, and I can read the message, pretty much figure out what they're getting at. Now I know that wind and waves didn't do this. The waves will destroy it, but random forces of nature don't make hearts in the sand and communicate a message. We kind of know that, and we know that without having to be present when the intelligent people are doing their work. The work itself speaks for them. Now, we're surrounded by a lot of information-rich systems that are far more complex than this. Let's take a look. If you pick up a local newspaper, well, there's a little more information in here than in the heart in the sand. I mean, there's the cover stories and lifestyle, and you've got entertainment and ads and editorials, sports, a lot of information in here. Now, one could try to explain the principles of ink bonding to paper fibers, and yes, that would explain the chemical basis of what we see here. But ink bonding to paper fibers doesn't tell about the meaning within the pages. We know that this meaning is the product of intelligence, writers and editors and photographers. We don't have to see them in process making this to know that there is intelligence involved. It's pretty intuitive that we can figure that out. But what about when we look within us, or within every living thing on this earth? There's DNA in the nucleus of every cell. And so in the 100 trillion or so cells in my body, there's DNA, about 500 encyclopedias worth of basically computer code. Probably the most condensed, complex information that we know of in the universe. And some people would say that that information, of course, is just the product of random forces of nature and chemical bondings. I find that hard to believe. Or they tell me that the human brain processes 300 billion bits of information per second as it serves as command central for those 100 trillion cells in the human body. And that just blows me away. I think, well, how could such a thing happen by chance? Or the human eye with 136 million light-sensitive rods and cones to take in messages from our environment in color and black and white and transmit them through a little fiber optic cable to be interpreted by the brain. And we look at that and say, well, that could happen by accident through random chaotic processes, and yet the heart in the sand and this paper definitely needed intelligence. I don't have quite enough faith to accept that. The Bible tells me that the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. In the book of Romans chapter 1, it says, what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible qualities, eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. We have no excuse. Just logic and reason tell us that intelligent information, sequentially and meaningfully arranged, leads us to assume an intelligent source. Why would we want to reject a God that is so incredibly powerful and incredibly intelligent and has created such beauty? The art says something about the artist. The symphony says something about the composer. We're in this beautiful symphony of life. Let's acknowledge and give credit to the God who is. He loves us and wants us to know him. And he is knowable. I hope that will be your experience. God bless.